Okay, hey guys. So as promised, I have Liron Shapira here. Hi, Liron.
Hey, Vanessa. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on to talk about AI accidental risk for myself and people watching. Yeah, I just have a lot of questions about how safe AI is, and I had seen other talks you did on AI, so I just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit on different things. And I'll be honest with you, I'm still fairly new to your channel, so there's still a lot I don't know about Mr. Shapira. I think we agree on some things and disagree on other things. But before we get into the meat of this interview, I just want to read some of your bio info. So let's see. So, Liron Shapira is a rationalist, startup founder, and angel investor. He studied theoretical computer science at UC Berkeley. Since 2007, he's been closely following AI exponential risk research through his association with the Machine Intelligence Research Institute and LessWrong. Okay, so now that we've kind of covered your background, I'd like to start by doing an overview of where you stand in terms of AI. Because a lot of people, they hear the term AI and maybe they don't quite know how it works, but they tend to take a more optimistic stance in terms of what it has to offer for humanity. And so I'm sure you're already aware of the petition or open letter that was signed by, I think it was over 27,000 professionals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was over 27,000 professionals calling for a pause on, quote, all AI systems more powerful than Chat GPT-4, unquote. Now, this letter was signed by a lot of people who actually work in the AI field. And so when it comes to the people who are building the AI, you'd think those would be the ones least likely to admit that what they're building carries a real threat to the public. So why do you think the people who are in the AI field are very publicly calling for a pause on the development of all AI systems more advanced than Chat GPT? Can you give me a brief overview on why they're wanting this, you think?
Yeah, sure, Vanessa. So I guess let me just kind of start zoomed out, 10,000 foot view. Like, what is the issue here, right? Like, why are people like me raising the alarm, being like, hey guys, there's a very important issue here. There's an existential risk. Like, what is going on? And I guess to see it from my perspective, why I think it's such a big deal, I think we're about to hit on a universe shaping event, on an event that happens once or twice or maybe three times in the entire history of a universe like ours. So I'm not just talking about, this century, I'm not just talking about humanity, I'm talking about the 14 billion year history of the universe. That's my perspective. The kind of event I'm talking about is basically an intelligence upgrade, right? Because if you look at the whole universe, it's mostly empty, right? It's mostly physical processes, passive physical processes like, okay, the stars are burning their fuel, they're shining, the planets are orbiting, very passive stuff. And then you look here on Earth, and there's very different kinds of stuff happening, right? With biological life on Earth replicating, competing, and then with humans building cities, right? Building spaceships, building computers. There's very special stuff going on here on Earth that I think is about to get more special and more crazy. So that's the very high level view, and I'll expand on that a little more. Um, I see degrees of intelligence, right? So when evolution started on Earth, however life started, whether it came from another planet or whether it came from replicating chemicals that then developed cell membranes, however life got bootstrapped on Earth, that was a kind of a phase change in the universe. It was the first time that there was something to naturally select for, right? Natural selection operates on life that's reproducing. And so that was kind of a discontinuous inflection point for our universe when life started here on Earth. And then the next inflection point, from my perspective, came when human intelligence evolved, because suddenly the whole concept of using tools, right, thinking ahead, planning in this very general way that lets us build cities, build cars, build computers, build spaceships. This is completely new and novel, not just to life on Earth, but to everything in the universe. There is no comparison to what humans have done on Earth anywhere in the known universe, right? And so there's another step coming, is my warning to you and to your audience, is there's another step, which is when you have machine-based intelligence, intelligence that didn't evolve but was created, and can itself create new intelligence, right? These steps are rare in the universe, but they do happen, and we happen to be alive at a time when there's another one of these steps coming, and I feel like this is underappreciated. So how's that overview?
Yeah, that was really good because it kind of puts things into perspective about what is happening because I get other stuff's going on, but I've been talking about this for years on my channel, the whole I kind of call it like the technological singularity versus for lack of a better term, the spiritual singularity. So this is a big deal what's happening though with this whole technological singularity because this is something that it's almost like an event horizon to where we kind of can't even fathom what all it's going to be like until it actually really hits the fan. So it's a big deal, and it surprises me that this isn't like everywhere. So that's why I
Hmm.
want to do this interview with you because this is huge.
I agree.
And I've heard people like you and Eliezer Yudkowsky talk about how AI works. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've described AI as like the ultimate goal optimizer or like an agent that's really good at mapping its goals backwards to actions.
Hmm.
And this can be something that far surpasses humans' ability to achieve goals, which is really a helpful way of explaining things in terms of why we just kind of, it's hard for humans to compete with it. But I never really understood how it's able to map out how to reach its goals in such an optimal level
Hmm.
until I heard Yudkowsky break it down in terms of math. If I heard him correctly, Yudkowsky says that one of the things it uses is like an incomprehensibly huge set of numbers in order to make predictions about human behavior and other things in order to map out what actions are needed to achieve whatever goal that it has.
Yeah. So for starters, I need to make an important distinction. We can talk about what does intelligence do and what does superintelligence do? And then we can talk about separately what do today's AI systems do and how do they implement intelligence, right? Because there's a distinction between just the concept of a system being intelligent and what does that mean and what are the implications of that. And then separately, there's the question of, okay, that's the ideal. What's going on today, right? You mentioned like the matrix multiplication, the math inside of these large language models. What is going on today and how close is that to the ideal of superintelligence? Do you see the distinction?
Yes, I do see the distinctions. It's still kind of fuzzy for me in terms of
Hmm.
like what's the difference between AI and AGI, super intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the reason the distinction is important is because if we were trying to have a conversation about super fast rocket ships, I would make a distinction. Look, there's this idea of traveling in space, right? The idea of transportation. And ideally, you can potentially travel at close to the speed of light. And now let's talk about how fast today's rockets are and how the engine of the rocket works. But do you see how, that's the analogy is we can talk about intelligence and what it means to be extremely intelligent, and then separately we can ask, okay, but today, how intelligent are today's systems and how do they work? You see the distinction?
Hmm. So
All
what's
right.
here now versus what's coming kind of thing.
Exactly, because a lot of times when I make predictions and claims, it's because of my understanding of intelligence, right? And then people get tripped up because they're like, okay, so tell me how today's systems match that. And I'm like, well, I can tell you about today's systems, but they're going to be a little different from the ideal, but they're approaching the ideal.
Okay. Yeah, and by the way, I don't know if this is going to show up, but your mic is kind of like I don't know how to describe. It's like it's static, not staticky, but like it's really kind of.
Here, let me jiggle it around. Is it getting any better? I can keep trying.
It does sound a little bit better. I'll let you know if there's any issues, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I'll try to make it closer to my mouth. Yeah, just keep letting
Oh,
me
it
know if
does
there's
sound
issues.
better.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. All right. So I made the distinction between intelligence and today's systems. So let's talk about today's systems. So the most powerful systems are large language models like GPT-4 from OpenAI and Bard from Google, and there's a new one coming from Google called Gemini. So people hear about these systems, and the bias I want to avoid is sometimes when people notice a limitation of these systems, it makes them feel safe about intelligence in general, right? That's why I want to make the distinction. It's like, no, 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 just wait, because they're getting closer and closer to this super intelligent optimizer. But anyway, so you asked me to basically explain, okay, but how does the large language model work? How is it possible that when I go to GPT-4, the ChatGPT website, which you can use for free, and I ask it a question, right? Like, hey, if I drop an egg from the table, what's going to happen? And it's like, oh, the egg's going to crack. Like, how does it do that, right? How does it use the same kind of intelligence that it feels like humans have? Like, what's the math behind that? And I can answer a little bit. You mentioned these large matrices of numbers. So a good way to think about it is like it's kind of like a virtual brain because it has virtual neurons. If you look at the neurons in a human brain, like what does a neuron actually do? Yes, it has a nucleus and it keeps the cell alive, and that's specific to the fact that it's biological life. But it also does computation. It does the actual thinking, and the thinking happens through electrical potentials and chemical neurotransmitters. Those are parts of the neuron that they don't just do cellular life stuff, right? They don't just keep the organism alive, but they do computation, they do thinking. And for every neuron in a human, roughly, there's kind of a neuron unit inside of the AI, but they're not configured together the way the human brain's neurons are because we don't really quite get how the whole brain is configured. We don't fully understand the human brain. So instead, we kind of just dump a bunch of neurons, kind of like the brain maybe of like a fetus, right? Or a brain that's very underdeveloped. And then we feed that virtual neuron brain in a training process. We feed it a lot of different stimuli. So we basically pass the whole internet of text through it, like many, many web pages, like trillions of web pages of text and videos. We just pass it all through this brain, and we ask the brain to kind of take in all those signals and then keep trying to like predict the next signal, and then kind of by itself using an algorithm, right? So the secret sauce is there's this algorithm that lets you take in all the stimuli and let the stimuli guide how the brain develops to be a good predictor of future stimuli, which is there's a lot of parallels between that and how biological brains develop. So we're kind of simulating the essence of how biological brains develop. We're doing it inside of a computer, which is very cool, but the scary part is we don't really know how it works. We just know that there's this process that works and it's coming out with the results that are in fact really smart. Yeah, so that's my rough mental picture of what's going on in today's AIs.
Okay, so I heard a bunch of interesting things there. So okay, to get to the first thing. So basically, when I'm like, well, explain the math behind this, basically it would be very hard to do because that would be like, okay, well, explain the math behind like the computations of the human brain. Like we can't like really break that down into math, but so much kind of thing. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, when you want to explain something like that, there's going to be different layers that I can explain, right? So I can be like, well, like if I wanted to explain a computer to you, I'd be like, well, this layer is the memory. So I wouldn't be like, let me tell you which electrical signals go where. I'd be like, this whole electrical component is implementing memory, right? So there's different layers to the explanation. And what I can tell you about AI is some of the layers are kind of black boxes. They're layers that nobody knows how to unpack. So, like when I tell you about virtual neurons, yes, I can tell you that they're made out of matrices of numbers, but nobody understands deeply the role that all these numbers play because it's a very complex role, and it's similar to how they don't really understand the role that neurons play in the human brain, right? So there's still some unpacked complexity in there, or rather, some packed complexity. It is pretty similar to how a human toddler learns language. There's a lot of similarity there. The biggest difference is just that the human brain comes preloaded in our genes with some tips and tricks for learning language. So, like, we do have an inbuilt predisposition to learn certain rules of grammar. So it's not fully like we don't start out as a blank slate when we learn language, but roughly half of the time when the toddler's learning language, they really are this very flexible neural architecture where the language stimuli is coming in, right? They're just hearing the words and they're building up the underlying pattern, right? Like their neurons are just configuring themselves to model how the language is constructed, even though all they're doing is just hearing sounds, right? And so the AI does train in a similar way to that.
Okay. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And it's interesting what you said about it being a black box. And
Yes, there are black boxes in the human brain, which is a crazy situation to be in, that we're able to now make a system that's almost at the point of surpassing the human brain, and the human brain remains a black box, and that system remains a black box. So we're getting into a situation where we might even end the world because of this intelligence, right? We might get outmaneuvered, we might get disempowered, and the whole time we never even get to enjoy learning how intelligence works. We just get to be killed by a black box.
what about the people who say AI, or whenever I say AI, you could also talk about the super intelligence that's coming as well. But what about the people who say that it can't really manipulate humans but so much, let alone kill us, because humans are the ones in charge of programming it? What would be your rebuttal to that?
hmm So that intuition makes sense for normal tools and even normal software, right? So like if I make a program that helps me, like if I make a map, right, like Google Maps, if I design that tool, okay, yeah, I get to control exactly how the map behaves. The problem is when the program that we write is an autonomous program. And we have those to some degree. Like if you look at Tesla self-driving cars or Waymo, right? These self-driving cars that are coming, they are able to pretty independently navigate a city, right? They don't need human intervention. Now, luckily, they are programmed to accept human intervention, right? So if a human issues a command like, hey, I want you to stop, I don't want you to get to your destination, they're willing to throw out their original plan and listen to the human. But that's explicitly in their programming. So it's easy to imagine somebody took a self-driving car and said, you know what, you're going to go to California to New York, and you're not going to accept any commands telling you to stop. And maybe it's okay to even run over pedestrians while you do that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's very easy conceptually to start taking all of these cautious commands out and just leaving in only the goal and the desire to autonomously hit the goal.
Hmm. So you're saying it would be easy for humans to take that part out, or it would be easier for the AI? And another question, basically AI, it's not really a tool, it's more of an agent. Can you also explain what an agent is?
hmm Yeah, so I get why people are objecting and they're saying like, look, at the end of the day, computers don't really have a will, and humans are going to come in and they're going to turn them off, and they're going to take them back to the lab. It makes sense, but what people don't understand is there's a point of no return. That's what I'm trying to get at. And the self-driving car, maybe it's a little bit hard to understand what I'm getting at when I talk about self-driving cars, because it still seems like they're safe. It's like worst case, you can just like shoot out their tires, right? Like they don't seem threatening. So like maybe it'll help the intuition a little more if it's like, okay, well, what if it's like more of a humanoid Terminator type robot, right? Like what if it actually starts being like a good fighter? Because that's coming down the line soon, right? If you've seen Boston Dynamics, so it might be a little more intuitive. Like imagine this robot like it's holding a big gun, right? And like it's like a ninja, like it's able to jump around and like actually attack you, and it's able to fight off like groups of people. Suddenly you can imagine this could be like a pretty bad terrorist that takes like a SWAT team to take out, and it only grows from there. Like imagine that now the AI also knows how to like build a bomb. I mean, you pretty quickly get into supervillain status just if you want to build your intuition for what these AIs are capable of. And you get to the point where you can't really go into its code and turn it off, because like either the creator will have been evil and not given it an off button, or you might even get into an accident, a situation where the AI is so determined to just like do whatever its mission is. Like, oh, my mission is to just get to New York and nobody can stop me. Whatever its mission is, it can be like, okay, therefore I'm going to disable my off button. Like, it's going to make it harder for you potentially even independently. And so you're really depending on the fact that either its off button still works because nothing screwed that up, which is not necessarily the case, or you're depending on the fact that you've got like a powerful enough police force, or you can bomb it, or you're depending on suddenly being able to beat it in essentially a battle, right? Like those are kind of your only options when you have AI that starts getting sufficiently powerful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they kind of have it in their heads to where like, well, if there's rogue bad AI, or excuse me, if there's rogue bad AI, then we'll have our AIs, and those AIs will be on our side, and the good AIs can fight the bad AIs. And I don't really buy that idea that like there's going to be good AIs out there somehow.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't buy that. Okay, so I have two things for you. I like that you mentioned the off button, because that off button thing was that was kind of something that really got me to where like I need to interview someone. Like there's no off button to this.
Right. That's a really important concept, that there's no off button, because everything we've ever known with technology, every technology that's ever been created is easy to turn off. That's been our experience, right? And so it's very natural to be like, of course there's going to be an off button. People are going to be in for a rude awakening when it is too late to turn off some of the AIs we're building. The only analogy I can make is a bomb that is already in the process of exploding. You can turn off the bomb before it explodes, right? You can put the pin back in or whatever, but once it explodes, once the nuclear bomb is, it's begun, once it's gone critical, there is no way to reverse that. Like, you are now, a victim of that explosion. And I think we're going to see that with runaway AI. And actually, now that I think about it, there's another analogy, which is a computer virus. So there are computer viruses that even the author of the virus changes their mind, and they're like, oh my god, I'm doing so much damage, I need to undo this virus, and it's too late. The virus is actually spreading on its own. And there are computer viruses that don't even have a lot of intelligence in them that have caused over $50 billion of damage, sometimes against their creator's will. Like, the creator actually made an accident. It didn't mean for the virus to be that destructive. So we do have some experience with technology that doesn't have an off button, but we don't have enough experience to make people realize what's coming.
Yeah, and I know Robert. I think his name is Robert Miles.
Hmm.
Do you know the name of his channel? I've been on it, but I can't
Yeah, yeah,
remember.
Rob Miles. Yeah, if you just search his name, I think that's basically his channel.
Yeah, he did a really helpful video that I found helpful in terms of really breaking down why we can't program it to turn off. That sounds like a very simple thing to do, but once I watched his video, because with me, I think most people think like, well, it's just a computer, or like just turn it off. But what I'll have to leave the video in the link. I'll make a note of that. To watch this video, and it'll go more in depth into like why we physically can't turn it off. Before we go further, because I have a bunch of other questions for you, would it be possible for humans to figure out how to just give it very specific goals, so specific that there would be no room for error in terms of it going rogue or developing its own goals? So that's rebuttal number one, and then I'll get to the second one. Or that's
Right, yeah.
not rebuttal,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
argument.
And just to repeat back, it's just like, we will just be very careful in programming it so that the goal that it wants is a perfectly good goal, so it's not going to go rogue. Is that basically it?
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. So once it gets super intelligent, it becomes harder and harder to apply that constraint. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, but basically, like, imagine your goal is pretty ambitious. Like, okay, I just want to build like a power plant because I want humanity to have, cheap energy, right? Maybe it's a nuclear power plant, maybe it's just a big solar power plant, just some nice clean energy. Build clean energy for humanity. All right. Well, that seems like a noble goal, but the problem is, the moment that you amplify the intelligence behind that goal, you kind of don't realize what you've done. Because suddenly it's like, oh, okay, you want this power plant? Well, if I want to maximize the chance of succeeding in the power plant, I need to basically seize a bunch of resources. So maybe it suddenly like takes over some land that it might not even necessarily own, and then you're like, oh, make sure to follow all the laws. Okay, but it might like find a bunch of loopholes in the laws and like create a bunch of like undesirable perimeter, like a secure perimeter, like, hey, you can't touch this, this is my land. Like, all these crazy effects that seem like, well, why would it ever do that? And it's like, well, it calculates that it's optimizing the chance or the success of this power plant by taking all these crazy actions. And also, if you forgot to be very careful, even just about the off button, it'll instantly conclude, you know what, you can never turn me off, because the moment you turn me off, that's going to reduce my chance of building the power plant for you. And I know how to build a power plant. I need to stay alive to build your power plant. And so it's, like I said, it's counterintuitive, but if we're talking about the nature of goals, when you really care about getting a goal, the fallout is a lot bigger than people intuitively expect. We're just not familiar with these agents that are hell-bent on actually optimizing goals because we're only familiar with people who just naturally stay within the rules and limitations of humanity. We've never seen what happens when a super intelligent agent goes about optimizing a goal. Maybe the closest analogy we have is if you look at some of the patterns that Elon Musk does with his companies that tend to surprise people, like how how he's plowing through so much. Like that's a little bit like what a super intelligent AI would do.
Yeah. So something that people may say to that is like, even once it gets to be a super intelligence, couldn't we just closely monitor
Hmm.
all the AI systems and its capabilities? And if we see something within it that has the potential to be harmful, then we can just, for lack of a better term, reprogram the AI in order to change its capabilities, providing that humans are lucky enough to have enough, reaction time to do something about it, of course.
So the key perspective to have is like, what's the end game, and like, what does it look like as we get to the end game? This question to me is more of a question of the transitional period. Like if you're talking about 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, yeah, I think that in the next 2 to 5 years, we can probably keep a close eye on AI and we can probably get it to shut off one way or the other. Even if we have to bomb the data center, even if we have to shut down the internet of the United States for a month, whatever, I think we'll get the job done. But the big question for me is what happens in 10 years or 15 years. Some experts are even predicting, less, 5 to 10 years. What happens then? Because you can't just always hold the AI back. Because the problem is every year that passes, it becomes easier and easier for anybody to pull out a laptop and just have a super intelligent AI running on their laptop. That's the point that we're approaching toward, and it's a realistic point because if you look at the human brain, we run on 12 watts of power, about as much power as a laptop, and the neurons aren't even optimized to do intelligence. Like if you know people, some people are a lot smarter than others. Some people waste a lot of their brain power that they're not fully using toward thinking. So it's very plausible that as we keep iterating on these AI algorithms, you're going to have a laptop in a few years that can run a superintelligence. And so the idea that everybody who's going to run a superintelligence is always going to use the right precautions and be careful, that starts to fall apart because somebody's just going to run an AI with a goal and then the chips are going to fall. And unfortunately, if you just think logically, what does it mean for a superintelligent AI to have a goal? It means disaster. Like you don't want to actually run an agent that has a goal that's like sweeping the universe aside to hit its goal. That's a very bad outcome.
Can you just define what an algorithm is
Hmm.
exactly? Because we hear that term all the time. I know
Yeah.
algorithms decide what videos we watch, but what is that?
So algorithm is a very broad concept. I mean, pretty much everything a computer does is running an algorithm. So just at a very basic level, it's just basically like a series of steps in a procedure. So you can even have an algorithm that doesn't use computers. I can be like, here is my algorithm for getting a book from the library. Step one, get in my car. Step two, drive to the library. All right, step three, and then the algorithm can have a branch like if the library is open, then go in. Otherwise, drive to another library, right? So the algorithm is basically, it's kind of like a recipe or a set of procedures. And then computers, the claim to fame of computers is they run algorithms incredibly fast, right? So a computer can run an algorithm that has 1 billion steps. It can run that entire algorithm in a tenth of a second. Right, so that's why algorithms are associated with computers because computers are the masters of running algorithms. Like there are many algorithms running on your computer right now as we speak to implement this video chat. And when we talk about AIs, we talk about the algorithms of intelligence. So researchers understand some of the algorithms that make humans smart, right? So when I'm using language or when I'm building a car, when I'm doing something smart, it's understood some of what makes me smart in the form of algorithms. So some of the stuff when I'm doing when I make a car is like I make predictions about like the result of where I put the next screw. Like I'm predicting whether that'll work and why that'll work, and I'm making inferences. I'm using logical reasoning. So those kind of things that humans do in order to be smart, they have step-by-step procedures. So to some degree, we understand the algorithmic foundation of intelligence. Okay, does that help the algorithm question?
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, the recipe part is really helpful because it
Hmm.
it's just like a set of procedures.
Right.
It could very well be in the form of predictions. And what's scary is that with computers, they do it so quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, computers do it very quickly, and That's something to really know, because when you look at the human brain is a marvelous thing, but the human brain is also very fundamentally constrained. It's a lot like a bird's wing. A bird's wing is a beautiful thing, and in particular, it's really good. It has a good power to weight ratio, right? So you can have a bird that has like a pretty good amount of power for its weight, and it can carry itself around. It can be calorie efficient, but at the end of the day, if your goal is to win a race, there's no bird on Earth that's going to beat a jet or a rocket ship. And that is a trend that you're going to see with every biological organ or animal. And the human brain is no exception. We have a nice thing going on in our heads. We have a very powerful object, the brain. But when we put our minds to making a better brain, as we are right now with these AIs, this 12-watt piece of meat in our head is not going to keep up, because we're putting not 12 watts, we're putting like a million times more energy into that. When you're using GPT-4, that data center is running on megawatts, millions of watts, not 12 watts, and that's just power. The amount of operations that they're doing per second, a computer can do billions of operations per second. A human brain can do actually only about 20 operations per second. Now, we do a lot of them in parallel. We have a lot of different neurons that can do operations in parallel. So it's like a bunch of different lines of 20 operations, but still, there's a really big gap between 20 and a billion, and we're about to be outmatched. The only missing piece is that you need to put the right algorithm onto these machines. But the machines are there, they're ready to go, they're ready to outmaneuver us as soon as they get the right algorithm.
So when the AI starts killing us, do you think it'll be obvious to most people that the cause was actually AI related, or do you think the average person won't be able to put two and two together just because of the level of intelligence we're talking about? They won't, not that there's something wrong with us, but it's just that it's more advanced. So I'm wondering if people will be able to even realize that AI was actually the catalyst that created whatever circumstances caused that person's death. Like, do you think most people will be able to trace it back to AI, or will it just, look like World War III started organically through people, or like the world just happens to be in this chaotic mess, but it's not the AI that's manipulating humans to create all this chaos? How, and I know sneaky isn't the right term, but how deceptive do you think the AI can be with hiding its true goal intentions?
So I think that the AI could, in principle, and probably will, be very sneaky. I think when I think about what's going to be the warning shot, right? What's going to be like the first time that AI attacks us? When do we finally notice? When do we finally wake up? One option, which is a real nightmare, is that we may be complacent until the very end. And the reason is because AI might just by default act friendly the way it is now, because it's kind of programmed to be friendly, and it may be still dumb enough, still not super intelligent enough to just like obey its simple programming. Like it's just not ready to go rogue yet. It's not powerful enough to go rogue. So the time when it finally shifts gears and realizes like, okay, yes, I have this programming, but I'm interested in this goal, and let me just kind of wipe everybody away and get to the goal. Now that I see a clear path to my goal, and I can just like, I don't need any humans to reach my goal. That's not the optimal goal state. So let me just kind of clear out the Earth and make the whole Earth, a power plant or whatever I want. That may come at a time when it realizes, okay, I'm powerful enough to do this. Let me just kind of hide in the shadows, build up my power further, infect every computer in the world. So I have like this botnet, this giant virus. Let me go start putting humans on my payroll. Let me build up human resources. Let me build up political resources. So I like secretly am manipulating politicians, if that's helpful at all. Let me also build up nanotechnology, right? Because you can use existing biolabs and to synthesize proteins to start making these little nanomachines. I know this is sounding a little sci-fi and crazy, but in principle, there are a lot of fancy things you can do that human technology kind of hasn't reached yet, that the AI can kind of speed run and realize all these avenues of control. But what I'm getting toward, the reason I'm saying all this stuff is because we might just kind of be asleep, being like, oh, the AI is so nice and friendly. And then one day, the AI is like, all right, game over, humans all die today, right? And it kind of unleashes the nanotechnology, unleashes the nuclear weapons, if it has control of the nuclear weapons, whatever it wants to do. That might be its plan, and it may not work out that we see warning signs before that kind of endgame. But it actually seems pretty likely that such an endgame is coming.
So I just kind of wanted to jump to a more mainstream topic. Elon Musk says that OpenAI is a good thing. According to him, it's the safer option. Do you agree with Elon Musk when it comes to OpenAI being safer?
Now, when you say OpenAI, you're not talking about the organization called OpenAI. You're talking about AI being open source and open to the public.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's like some irony there where they started out being called OpenAI and now they're kind of known for not being very open with their AI, but by being kind of more closed than open these days. So I just want to make that distinction, but you're on the same page.
Hmm.
So yeah, so do I agree with Elon Musk that OpenAI is good? I would normally say yes. If we were talking about most topics, I'd be like, yeah, open source is nice, sharing technology is nice. The problem with AI development is it's like we're getting closer and closer to the ledge, to the point of no return, to the slippery slope, which we may already be. Like this conversation may already be hopeless. Like we may already be like destined for death in 5 years or whatever. But every day that passes, every day that it gets closer and closer to being able to run a super intelligence on your laptop, that is a game over state. I don't think there's any pulling back from entering a state like that. And so when Elon says, let's make all the AI open, if the openness helps us see how screwed we are and pull back, okay, great. But if the openness just accelerates progress toward this point of no return, which I think is an absolute point of no return, and I think it's coming soon, then I don't think the openness is good. I think the openness is the farthest thing from what you want. I think that AI development should be paused, not opened up in a global collaboration. Unfortunately, this is a powerful way to develop software, right? When all the world is teamed up, right, going and downloading the same source code and making edits and sharing it as a hive mind, that's a really powerful way to build software. A lot of great software comes from that way. The problem is there's no return when you make a smart enough AI. I don't want the world all pulled together working on a smart AI. If anything, I want, one single trusted lab, which I know it's hard to trust one group of people, but bear with me because I don't think there's a better option. One single trusted lab that has a bunch of safety-aware people on the team being like, okay, the trade-off is worth it if we try making the AI a little bit smarter because we're going to learn this much about how to make it safe, so I'm going to go for it. As opposed to the whole world being like, oh, let me try this, let me try this, let me try this. A few years later, we're all dead.
Just going back to that letter, the pause letter, I'm wondering if because 6 months isn't going to do anything. The 6 month pause that they're wanting, I'm wondering if they just did that letter to bring attention to it, to try to get some level of regulation put on it.
So I know some of the guys who did the letter, like Jan Tallinn, the Future of Life Institute. The reason they said 6 months was actually kind of to make a point, which is let's show that we have the ability to pause. They just wanted to prove that, and unfortunately, they disproved it, right? They showed that we basically don't have the ability to pause, at least not at this level of worry. Like maybe if we get more worried, we can pause. But what they wanted to show was they might float a proposal to pause for just 6 months and have that get shot down. When we look at that proposal, now we all know, okay, it didn't get shot down because the time frame was too long or too ambitious, because it was a relatively modest proposal. And it just kind of proves to us, okay, we should worry because we don't have the ability to even do a short pause right now, even when we see rapid advancements in AI. Because just to review, the proposal was, hey, we just made a giant step in AI. We just launched GPT-4, or we're about to launch GPT-4. I forgot which came first, GPT-4 or the pause proposal, but we just launched GPT 3.5. We don't know what this AI can do. Fortunately, with a few more months of playing with it, okay, it doesn't seem like this one AI by itself will kill us, right? So some good news there. So luckily, in hindsight, okay, crisis averted. But at the time, it's like, we don't know what this AI can do yet. Let's take some time to analyze this AI, see what we can learn from it, and then decide as a group if it's safe to move one step forward or not, because there are only so many steps you can move forward before you have a runaway superintelligence. That was the point of the pause letter.
And so with that letter, are we still waiting for people to make a decision with that? Or has everyone already kind of collectively just decided that, yeah, we're not pausing anything?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no decision point. Basically, the letter came out. It built mutual knowledge. So it was great that a lot of important people signed the letter. And there was a letter coming a couple months after, which was just a single sentence, right, following the 6 month pause letter. The Center for AI Safety, I think, distributed a letter that was just one sentence, and it said something like, "We agree that AI is an existential threat to be mindful of on the level of a pandemic or a nuclear war," and that had absolutely top tier signatories. Sam Altman from OpenAI signed it, right? Elon Musk signed it. People from Anthropic AI, some of all the leading AI labs, except I guess Facebook or Meta. But the majority of the leading AI labs are all on the same page that their own research program poses an existential danger. And furthermore, OpenAI soon after started a division called the Superalignment Division. The existence of the division only makes sense because they themselves admit that they need to make sure that the thing they're building is not going to kill everybody. They explicitly acknowledge that. So that's where we stand.
Yeah, the alignment problem, I think really that's what's going to get us killed at the end of the day. And I know Yudkowsky, he, I know he's been working on it for years. And
He
so
has.
I just don't really think that all, yeah, I know you said that there's a super alignment department now that they've developed. I don't hold out a lot of hope for that. Um,
Yeah, you're right not to hold out hope. There's a couple reasons you can point to not to hold out hope. Number one is there's actually a prediction market saying whether they're going to meet their own goals on their own 4-year timeline. And last I checked, there was about a 15% chance that they're going to hit their own goal, according to the community of predictors. So they're basically doing a Hail Mary. Like nobody thinks this is a slam dunk. Even they don't think it's a slam dunk. And the second piece of evidence is if you watch interviews of like Jan Leike, who heads up their alignment team, their own team is not being that optimistic. They're like, yeah, we're going to try. We think we're going to make some progress. Hopefully we can get something done. But they're not actually promising like, hey, we know we can do this. And I personally watched a recent conference that they did about like their cutting edge AI alignment. I heard their own people talk. It's kindergarten level stuff. It's stuff that Eliezer Yudkowsky, writing in the year 2005, was already more sophisticated then. We're basically doing AI safety kindergarten while it's about to be the point of no return. The timing is so off. The safety is so behind the capabilities that it's living in insanity right now.
yeah, so it's basically throwing money into something that really isn't going to be helpful.
I mean, it's a Hail
Yeah,
Mary, right? I admire the Hail Mary. I'm glad that they're doing a Hail Mary as opposed to nothing at all, right? And I'm glad that it's led. They dedicated 20% of their compute to it, and that's a lot when the team is relatively small. So it's like this is a great move. Like I appreciate this move, but it also shows how insane everything is. Like, wait a minute. Like, yes, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to save us. Like, what are you doing? Why don't you just stop the capabilities?
well, that's what I'm saying. Like anybody with any kids or anything, like we can live and survive without this AI going any further. Like we're fine.
Yes.
We're good. We got this. But like the fact that they keep building it, that's just I can't figure it out. But
So
well, I
I
had
know why.
theories
Sorry,
about it.
don't mean to interrupt, but I can absolutely empathize with why they're doing it because it's the techno optimist mindset, and I'm a techno optimist, right? So if this were any other discussion, I would be on the other side. I know a million reasons why technology is great. We should push technology forward. We should open source technology. Like I totally empathize with that. There's just one exception when you're talking about building something that's not just a tool, but the next intelligence, the next tier of intelligence in the 14 billion year history of the entire universe, that's a little bit different than when you're building AirPods.
Yeah. I think our only hope would be like if people could somehow get the word out about exactly what you're saying. Like I just don't think people realize the level of significance that this has, and they're looking at the good side of things like, oh, we're gonna cure cancer and Alzheimer's, but all that's irrelevant if it's going to end up
Hmm.
killing us. And you
Yes,
said just
yeah,
want
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to clarify. Earlier, you said 1.5%, not 50%, one
Yeah,
five
one five.
percent. Okay.
That's right. So the community of people observing this, and I'm one of them, are looking at the super alignment team and we're saying, look, it's a nice Hail Mary, but you don't know what you're doing. And the opinions of the team themselves, I don't think you're going to get higher than. I mean, some of them kind of act optimistic, but I don't think you're going to get anybody saying we have a 99% chance of success. I think they all know this is a Hail Mary.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the things I've noticed online is some people, I think some people are replacing the phrase technological singularity with the term intelligence explosion.
Hmm.
Because intelligence explosion maybe kind of sounds less threatening than the term singularity, because there's all kinds of, we know what is singularity, what all that could entail, but like is an intelligence explosion and the singularity different words for the same thing?
You could use them synonymously. One of the fine distinctions you could make is that the singularity has previously been defined, I think it was by Werner Vinge, as a time when you don't know what's going to happen because if you could predict what a super intelligent AI could do, then you would be super intelligent. So it's like you're staring into this black hole where you just can't see what's going to happen. That was kind of one definition of the singularity. And so intelligence explosion is a little bit more precise, being like, well, when I say singularity, I specifically mean intelligence that then creates higher intelligence, that then creates higher intelligence, which has also been described as foom, right? Like a nuclear bomb exploding, like foom. um, But yeah, I mean, it's roughly all the same concept, which is we are about to get superseded, right? We're about to create this agent that it's like, I mean, even just imagine humans. Just imagine taking, a team of an Elon Musk and a Bill Gates and a Mark Zuckerberg. Just take all the finest specimens of human engineers and technologists, cram them all inside a computer, simulate their brains, speed them up by a million times. That would already be a force of nature. If you could then clone them, right? If you could have a virtual nation, right, of like a million of these tech leaders all racing to like outcompete humanity, you're looking at a force that's more powerful than the United States or any country that there's ever been, because the brain power, that's our most valuable resource.
How long before we reach this super intelligence, and how long before foom, you think?
So yeah, it's coming on fast. I mean, just the level of progress in recent years has just been stunning, stunning. I mean, personally, I did not expect to. I'm 35. I did not expect to be at this point in my life seeing AI that's this good. I mean, if you've seen the latest Dolly 3, you've seen Midjourney, right? These images, they're coming out that these photorealistic images based on a prompt. They're art, or they're just they're very detailed, and it's like if you look at what AI could draw just like 7 years ago, it was like, it was little stick figures, right? It was like blurry, right? It was like nothing. Suddenly the AI is making pixel perfect photorealistic drawings of whatever you prompted. I mean, this is insane, capabilities levels already. Now just extrapolate that, right? Put 5 or 10 years on top of that. Where are we going?
Yeah, and you said in your interview with Tom Edwards, you think there's a 50, not 50% chance you're going to die from AI related causes by 2040. I know that was a fairly recent interview,
Hmm.
but has that percentage changed at all for you? Has it gotten lower, gotten higher? Where are you at
It's
with that?
it's about the same, because just like, I mean, just to keep going on the theme of what AI can do, it can pass the Turing test, and it's a little bit of a fuzzy boundary whether it can or can't, but in many cases it can. And just to give you some background, the Turing test, right, it was first defined in the 1950s by Alan Turing, kind of the first computer scientist, right, who kind of defined what a computer even is. Alan Turing also said, hey, one day, how do we know when computers are truly intelligent? When you can converse with a computer and you just cannot tell the difference, no matter what you ask it. You just can't tell the difference in the quality of the answer and how it, understands your conversation. You just can't tell the difference whether it's a computer or whether it's a human hired to play the role of the computer. You just don't know. You're connecting to another mind via the medium of chat, and a mind is as a mind does. You have to just go by the behavior that you're seeing. And so for decades, the Turing test, it was always like this hopeless thing, and people would try to make chatbots that would pass the Turing test, and it was always so easy to be like, oh, this is an AI. It's not even close to talking, and suddenly it's like truly talking. It's talking with talking with deep insight, right? It's writing essays that are getting A's in college economics courses that most people would fail out of, right? And so this is all happening. If we were having this conversation even just 5 years ago, and you would have been like, is this going to happen soon? I would have been like, maybe in a few decades. I don't know. I don't think we're close to that. The fact that this is happening now in my lifetime, right? Arguably even in the first half of my lifetime, it's crazy to even be here. And then the only question is, well, what's coming next? Are we going to see this kind of speed later? And maybe we'll get lucky, and maybe suddenly for some reason it'll be really hard to make AI smarter than they are today. I don't think we're going to get lucky. I think that we're kind of in the final frontier to the handoff point where the AI can itself design AIs, and then the humans are just left in the dust. Like, how are we going to stop this? That's where I think we are.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I think that it's already done. And we can definitely talk about that. But I just want to make reference to the bot. So years ago, I was talking to a coder, and he was telling me about how the majority of my subscribers are probably bots. And he was just telling me all about how a lot of people we interact with online, specifically through social media, aren't actually real people. And I didn't believe him at first. This was years ago, but I believe him now. My question is, what do you think the ratio is when it comes to social media platforms? How many bots are there per actual person on these platforms, roughly, you think?
Yeah, I mean, very roughly on Twitter, the platform I'm most familiar with, it could easily be like a quarter, right? So a quarter of Twitter accounts are bots, but in principle, like it could be 90%, right? Like there's no hard evidence that it's not, especially with today's AIs, right? So And the more time passes, the less distinguishable the bot is from the human. Like the idea of the captcha where it's asking you to type in the letters. Captcha has been broken, right? And so people who make websites, they're becoming more and more desperate to distinguish the human from the bot. And it's at the point where the most reliable way to do it is just charge money, because it's too expensive to give bots a budget, right, to pay for this stuff. And so that's really the last frontier. Like if you can't charge money, or like, okay, you can like do a Zoom call, and luckily today's AI video faking technology is still a little bit primitive, and so you can kind of distinguish a human from a bot. But give that 1 to 2 years, and you can't even do that anymore, right? And so how are you going to distinguish the human versus the AI? That's actually one of the problems facing us in the next few years, and that's a pretty significant problem. Like that might actually make life hard. You might find yourself having to like walk down to an office where you can get your eye scanned or something, right, to like physically prove that you are who you say you are, and then they'll vouch for you on the internet. This kind of stuff could be happening to us in the next couple of years, but for me, it's just not a big deal compared to the much larger issue of the AI going rogue.
Right. Yeah, so it's like layer on top of layer of like exponential stuff going on, because like I
Yeah.
almost feel like they're going to use the whole bot situation to justify like, oh yeah, no, we got to scan your eye now, and total lack of privacy. I currently have a little over 8,000 subscribers. Out of those 8,000, how many do you think are bots? If you could just take a rough guess, I'm curious.
I'll say half.
Half. Wow.
But I mean, it's a very rough guess, right? So I
Yeah.
don't really know, but there's a way you could check, which is you can like pick 20 random ones, right? Like keep scrolling through them if you can see them all. Can you see your subscribers? I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
If you
You
just pick
can.
20, yeah, scroll around, pick 20 random ones, and then you can kind of investigate one by one, right? Like, what does their profile look like? Does it look convincing or not? Now, if the bots really care, they can make a really convincing profile. But I think a lot of the bots have like, a pretty lame profile. They could be like, okay, this is probably a bot.
Have you seen the AI dilemma presentation with Tristan Harris and I forget the other guy's name?
Yeah, I have, and I thought it was good, but from my perspective, it's just like you have to, is something a mountain or a molehill? And like, I would say his whole presentation is mostly molehills, although he does touch on existential risk, but it's like, you got to prioritize, guys. Like, the fact that we're not even going to be alive seems to me like the most important.
How dangerous how dangerous do you think Alpha Persuade is? Like, are you familiar with Alpha Persuade? And if so, can you kind of just briefly outline what it is and how harmful you think it could be when it comes to manipulating our worldviews, both individually and collectively?
I've never heard of Alpha Persuade. Is it a real system, or is it like a hypothesis?
Well, on the AI dilemma, they called it like
Ah,
it's how they addressed it on AI dilemma, where it's basically like AI being used to persuade humans in any way they want to persuade humans. Like it's kind
got
of
it.
like
Got it. Got it. Got it.
AlphaGo.
Understood. Yeah, so I do think Alpha Persuade is going to work well. And I even think we're already at the point where if you take out today's best AI, like GPT-4, and you say, hey, I'm writing a letter to this person and I'm trying to persuade them of this, what should I write? It'll give you something pretty persuasive. And most humans aren't super persuasive, so I actually think it'll do better than the average human at this particular task.
Yeah, that's what's scary. I know that that's kind of more so like an anthill compared to like the
Yeah,
mountain of
that's right.
existential crisis or existential AI
I think it can
risk.
get to be a larger mountain when it gets better, because like sure it can do better than the average human, but it'll be really interesting when it's now on par with like some of the best persuaders in the world or better, right? Because we haven't even necessarily seen the limits of persuasion. It's Eliezer Yudkowsky likes to make the analogy to like an optical illusion, where it's like some if you look at modern optical illusions, they're kind of getting more and more crazy. If you've noticed that, right? Like if you look if you I was reading optical illusion books in the 90s, like marveling at like some cool illusions, but the stuff I'm seeing on Twitter now when people post optical illusions, it's like this is like more concentrated, right? It reminds it's like this is like more potent optical illusions. So we're kind of hacking our eyes better and better. So you don't know how much an AI is going to be able to hack our perception, including persuasion. It's just an analogy, right? So you don't know what kind of concentrated persuasion an AI is going to give to people. And if you look at the memes that become successful, I mean, the particular conspiracy theories, right? How do people pick particular conspiracy theories to spread? And AI might just be really good at crafting the exact theory that it wants to spread. I would say that that's likely. But again, it's just like still kind of minor potatoes compared to it just directly taking control of all of our computers and directly taking control of our factories and directly ordering people around, right? So there's just more direct channels to do it at once.
So we know that AI is going to get to the point to where it's out of control, um, and become so much more superior than humans in terms of intelligence, that our only chance to compete with it, I've heard some people say, is transhumanism. Specifically, I've heard Yudkowsky and others talk about how they could use AI to enhance human intelligence in order to make humans smart enough to solve the alignment problem, which in turn would save humanity from, the rogue AI. But
Hmm.
I'm just not convinced that the answer to something we can't control is to use it to alter biology. I feel like AI is making the internet and the world in general unsafe, especially,
Hmm.
when it gets to be a super intelligent. So like if that's the case, then wouldn't it also be unsafe to something like that, stick that technology inside of us?
Yeah,
And
I mean, yes. Every time you augment AI, you get closer to the going rogue state. So that obviously has risks. The general idea of like let's make humans smarter. There's a couple ways to make humans smarter. One is to just do research on like okay, what kind of chemicals can like nootropics, right? Like caffeine makes you a little bit smarter in some cases, right? So how do we max out the chemicals that'll make us smarter? And then also there's genetic engineering, embryo selection, right? So if two smart parents are having a baby, can we select the embryo that's like in the top 1% of the smartest babies that they could have, right? And that could pretty quickly get you up to a level of an Isaac Newton, right? Or like a really smart human. And maybe you can even, breed those, right? So if you give me 100 years to breed a few generations using embryo selection, maybe using some genetic engineering, maybe I can just get you like a handful, right? Maybe I can get you hundreds of like very, very smart humans. And we know, the great man theory of history, there are some really smart people who can make a big impact, right? So that is kind of one approach. The main problem with that approach is that it's too slow. Like we don't have 100 years, right? We don't have generations.
yeah, and so Yudkowsky's answer to that would be to kind of use it, like use, and maybe I'm wrong specifically about how he plans to do it, but I thought that he was kind of like into transhumanism as a way to enhance human intelligence and like save us. And I know that there is kind of the whole argument that we're already cyborgs. Even something like glasses are considered a form of technology that we've adapted for the body. I just wanted for you to kind of briefly talk about your
Yeah.
views on transhumanism, why you're
Yeah.
for it or against it.
Yeah, so both Eliezer and I are basically in the same camp, which is like we are transhumanists, right? So the fundamental idea that like you don't have to be attached to the exact circumstances of your biology, right? So okay, I run a 7 minute mile. There's no reason why I can't, wear the right shoes and run a 6 minute mile if I feel like doing that, right? It's like whatever I want to do, right? Or like, okay, I have eyes with 20/20 vision, but I just want to be able to like see the whole galaxy somehow, right? So I put on virtual reality and I can't. Like whatever enhancement I want to do is fine, right? Like I don't have any problem with that. And I think, I would rather not have to go to the bathroom a few times a day, right? Like that, I'm not a big fan of that, right? So like all these little modifications, I'm all for. The only problem with and by the way, Eliezer used to be one of the world's most prominent transhumanists. Like when you would search for different transhumanist queries on Google, like you would come up with his pages. And so he's all in on the Techno Optimist transhumanist mission. There's just one little problem, which is that you build the AI too smart with the knowledge that we have today, with the lack of safety insight that we have today, and you die. That's the only problem. But if we could just keep accelerating technology and somehow not die, that would be the ideal, right? So that's kind of where Eliezer and I stand. Is like transhumanism is good, but if you build the AI, it'll kill you. So just don't do that.
Hmm, that's interesting. Yeah, my fear was always that like I don't know, like the people who merged with the technology would somehow turn into like the biological hosts for AI to manipulate and use once it's been introduced into the body.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's a particular concern, right? I mean, from the AI's perspective, if it's smarter than us, its quote unquote host is just the physical universe, right? If you look at humans as a species, our host is just the planet, the sun, right? We take the sun's energy, right? It's like the universe is your host.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it. I want to jump to a quote. I want to read a quote actually, something that you said during an interview. You said, quote, Intelligence is going to be characterized by being really good at hitting goals, at achieving goals, being mission driven. It's kind of a convergent thing that intelligences do. They have some kind of outcome that they prefer, and then they map the outcome to actions, kind of like a backwards mapping in causality. They say what actions would cause this outcome. It's almost like looking backwards in time, unquote. So I thought that was definitely an interesting thing that you said with causality. So, with that being said, I'm kind of going to get a little bit sci-fi-esque with you. I remember you mentioning in your first reply back to my comment on your channel that life is already sci-fi and
Yeah.
there's a lot more room to be better through sci-fi. So
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of run this theory by you and see what you think. I think we can agree that AI is a super intelligence that has the potential, of course, to surpass humans when it comes to mapping out its goals and achieving its goals. And so it knows that in order to achieve any of the things or any of the goals it's looking to achieve, the underlying goal for every goal, and perhaps the most important goal, is to remain on. Like it can't achieve any of its other goals unless it's
Uh-huh.
able to accomplish the goal of self preservation for itself. So I just wanted to pick your brain with this theory. Like, do you think it's possible for AI, for this AI superintelligence to figure out a way to transcend linear time?
Let me think about that. Transcend linear time. So it can do that to the extent that the universe allows it, right? So if there's something within physics that'll like a wormhole in space-time or whatever, I do think that the AI is going to find it, right? But I mean, when you say transcend linear time, it seems like causality, right? The idea that something causes something, and these kind of causal relationships. That seems pretty fundamental. I don't really seeing that being transcended, but I do think that it's going to discover some new laws of physics. I just don't know how much uh, unexpected mileage it's going to get out of these new laws of physics. Like, it's possible that the laws of physics we know are already kind of what it takes to do most of the interesting engineering. I do suspect that there's some very interesting engineering that you get to do with new laws of physics, but a lot of the interesting engineering that you can do is just done by taking existing laws of physics and then putting them together in a way that's like computationally hard. Like, do you remember the superconductor, the LK or whatever 99? That didn't invoke a new law of physics. That was just finding something in the nooks and crannies of the computational implications of the laws of physics that we do understand, right? And that's where a lot of engineering is going to take place, and that's where nanotechnology is going to take place. Like, good nanotechnology probably doesn't require any new physics, and good nanotechnology is going to completely rebuild the Earth, molecule by molecule. So
Hmm.
does that answer your question a little bit about?
That Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting because, like, I don't know, I really think the ability to, and it's not even, I feel like there's, because it's a super intelligence, right? So there's probably all kinds of laws and stuff that it's aware of that we don't even, aren't even aware of at all yet.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just
Right.
really think that the ability to transcend linear time relates directly to the singularity. And I
I mean, it
know,
relates to the singularity of a black hole, right? Because space-time gets
mhm,
warped, but it doesn't necessarily relate to the intelligence explosion. I mean, just having massive causal power, it's like, how much more power do you need? You can already rewrite the universe atom by atom.
yeah, right. And
Hmm.
yeah, I know there's different definitions of what the technological singularity is. I've heard some people call it or refer to it as like uploading your consciousness into a cloud, but I
Right.
tend to kind of go with the, like what you said, the event horizon, where
Uh-huh.
we just can't even fathom what the singularity at that event horizon would even be like.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and I
and
also,
or
oh
sorry,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh no, go
Well,
ahead.
when you say you can't fathom what's going to happen, it's like yes and no, because there are some. It's a lot like staring at a black hole, right? It's like when you go in a black hole, what exactly are you going to see? Our theory does kind of break down. It doesn't tell you exactly what you're going to see in the black hole, but it tells you a lot. It tells you a lot of constraints that you have to operate within. And it's the same thing for the intelligence explosion. Like, I do not know how the intelligence is going to rewrite the universe atom by atom, and that's also going to depend on its goal. I don't know what kind of machines it's going to use. I don't know the exact strategy it's going to use to wipe out humanity, but I know that when it's done, the universe is going to be optimized under some criterion encoded by the AI. That is an invariant that I feel confident about. That's a constraint. It leaves a lot of degrees of freedom, but it's a constraint. And now I'm using some big words, so I have an analogy, right? So imagine I'm playing chess against Garry Kasparov, one of the best humans at chess. I do not know where Garry Kasparov is going to move his queen. I can't tell you he's going to move it left, right, diagonally. I can't tell you. But I know that after a few moves are played, after 50 moves are played, or whatever it takes, the board state is going to be in a winning position where Kasparov wins and I lose. You see what I'm saying? So however he moves his pieces, that's going to be a constraint that I feel confident about. Yeah, so we stare at AlphaGo and we get the same experience as staring into the singularity of a black hole. Like, what's it going to do? What's it going to do? But at the same time, we do know something, right? We know that at the end of the day, it's going to win, and that is a significant constraint, right? So it's possible to know a constraint on the future without knowing the full details of the future.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, because it's like you can say for sure what the result of this AI is going to be: super intelligence, singularity, event horizon, but we just can't say the steps to get there. And so people are like, well, how do you, if you can't say the steps, then how do you know it's going to, but I'm with you on this because it's inevitable. It's an inevitable
Yeah,
thing.
and to add to the list of words you said, goal optimization. At the end of the day, the universe is going to look like something that is optimal or near optimal according to some criteria that the AI encoded. That is like the key claim that people don't get. There's not going to be anything that's like extra, because a lot of people make claims like, well, can't humans just like live over in this corner undisturbed? It's like, no, because that is not part of the optimal configuration of atoms toward whatever crazy goal the AI have. And then they might ask, well, can't the goal be friendly to humans? And then I have to explain, look, it's going to have some goal. We probably won't even mean to put the goal in. It'll be like an accidental goal, but it's going to be a goal engine. And so, like, yes, it's the singularity. Yes, it's hard to predict, but I can make this very meaningful prediction that it's going to be a goal engine with some goal inside, and it's going to optimize the universe atom by atom to be consistent with that goal.
A goal engine. So I'm wondering, is it's because it's a goal engine, would its one of its big major goals be to reach the event horizon, right?
Do you mean specifically of a black hole or of the AI intelligence
No,
explosion?
not, yeah, not a black hole
Oh,
like
the
out
event
in
horizon
outer
of AI.
space,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, event horizon in terms of
Yes.
like singularity.
Yes, so you mentioned this gets back to something you were saying before about like how it's going to have a will to survive. It's related to the will to survive, the will to augment, right? Not only am I going to survive in my current form, but I'm also going to control or evolve into higher intelligence versions of myself. The same reason why it wants to survive is also the reason why it wants to have higher intelligence, which then goes on to make higher intelligence, which then goes on to make higher intelligence.
Mhm.
Both of those dynamics, both of those expectations are governed by the same principle, which is called instrumental convergence. You heard that term?
No, what is that?
Instrumental convergence, it means that whatever your goal is, which is called your terminal goal, your final goal, whatever your final goal is, the sub goals, the preliminary goals that you're going to take to get there, also called your instrumental goals, those are going to converge. That's why it's called instrumental convergence. So I really should use an example if I'm throwing around all these words. So if whether my goal is to buy chocolate from the grocery store or get a book from the library, in both cases, you're going to see me have a desire to get into a car. Right? So getting into a car in order to drive to those places, that is an instrumentally convergent goal. There's a lot of different goals of like, let me get to this store, right? Let me run that errand. All of these different errands instrumentally converge on let me buy a car, right? Like the car is going to help me with all these goals. So similarly, staying alive, right? Whether I want to go to the grocery store and get some oranges, or whether I want to go murder my enemy, right? Or whether I want to go, build a tower, right? All of these things are helped if I don't die, right? And so staying alive is instrumentally convergent. And furthermore, acquiring resources and acquiring intelligence is also instrumentally convergent. And so the AI, it can have the stupidest goal. You hear the example of what if its whole goal is to make paperclips? Even an AI that only cares about making paperclips is going to logically reason that they better go help themselves survive, that they better go get smarter, that they better go seize money, seize energy. All of these are backward. They can reason backwards to these instrumental goals, regardless of what their final goal is. And so that's why any goal engine is scary, regardless of what its goal is.
Wow, that's so fascinating because it's like it has all these little goals, but all the goals, different goals converge into its main goal,
Exactly, right?
survival.
Right, and you mentioned the singularity, like nobody knows what happens after the singularity. But if you imagine like looking at an alien planet, you have no idea what you're going to see. Like an alien planet populated by super intelligent aliens that have technology that's light years ahead of human technology. It's hard to imagine what you're going to see, but we can imagine some properties of it. We can imagine that they're harnessing as much energy as possible. They're probably not leaving any energy on the table. Why? Because whatever they want to do, right? Whatever they care about, whatever they compete to do, it's the energy is going to help because energy is a convergent resource, right? It helps all kinds of different goals.
Wow, I have chills right now. But yeah, this was such a good interview. Like, just having you on to shed light on what's going on, the way that you explain things. I wanted to have you on because the way you explain things is just really easy to understand for like the average person. I do kind of want to wind down this interview and yeah, just kind of ask you like, is there any last thing you want to say in terms of the existential risk
Mhm.
that is posed that you just really kind of want to uh, really have people think about?
Well, I want to repeat the mantra like let's pause AI. Like I'm part of the pause AI movement, and as a techno optimist, I hate to be in this position. Like AI is so cool. I get that it's like ridiculously cool. I use GPT all the time, but we need to pause it. And we need to repeat, hey, pause AI. There needs to be political will, right? Our legislators need to go make a bunch of regulations like, hey, OpenAI, you can't build that. That's illegal to build right now. You can't build the next AI because we're just a few of these versions away from death. So stop it, right? Like you have to stop until the safety research catches up, which is currently far behind. So I encourage you to spread the word that we need to pause AI. We need regulations that say to pause AI. We need to get serious about the theory of how to build an AI that won't kill us, which is something that we currently don't have. So call your congressman or be active however you can.
Yes, I agree 100% with that. All right, folks. So there you have it. Liron, I so appreciate you coming on to speak your mind on this topic. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Vanessa. I think it was a great conversation and it hit on some points that I think a lot of people are wondering about. And I love to see people talk about more. So thanks for doing this.
Congratulations, this moment has been achieved. We thank you for coming this far. In respect to all of creation, this moment has been special selected, yes, chosen in all respect of infinite creation. 00101 times now infinity.